I didn't know, that morning, that it would be the last time I saw the sun the way I always had. And worse, I had no idea the last words I would say to someone who loved me would be spit out with anger, as if the world revolved only around me. The time clock on my computer screen blinked red. 8 o'clock had become 9, 9 had become 10, and I was still buried in the stack of reports that had to be finished. Another delay would kill me. My boss wouldn't forgive it. Money? Debt? The looming eviction notice. The cold look from the bank manager the day before. All of it hammered inside my head. There was no space for anything else. Just the endless spreadsheet. The reports nobody cared about, but which, somehow, had become the ruler by which my worth as a human being was measured. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. It buzzed again. I cursed under my breath, grabbed it, and answered without even checking who it was. "Yeah," I snapped. There was a pause, and then a familiar voice soft, hesitant. "My sister. Hey, I needed to talk. Are you busy?" I clenched, my jaw. The screen glared back at me, reminding me of everything I hadn't finished. "Didn't I already tell you I'm busy? I don't have time for this right now." I just thought what? That I'd drop everything because you suddenly need to talk. I've got real problems here. Rent, work, deadlines. I can't play therapist whenever you feel like whining. The silence on the other end stretched. I could hear her breathe, shallow, hurt, and for a second, who's to sicken? My chest tightened, but I shoved it away. "I'll call you later," I muttered, even though we both knew I wouldn't. Then I hung up. The echo of the call lingered. A faint bitterness. I shook it off, flexed my fingers, and typed harder, as if the sound of the keys could drown it out. Outside, people had been talking about the eclipse for weeks. A once-in-a-lifetime alignment, they said. Some special thing that would blanket the city in shadow. Scientists on the radio explained the mechanics. Social media flooded with posts about watching parties. I couldn't have cared less. While others planned their little stargazing evenings, I planned survival. Bills don't wait for the moon to move. Still, I noticed the light change through the blinds. A strange dimming, like a cloud moving across the sun, but heavier, slower. I glanced up for a second, annoyed at the distraction, and then back down to the report. My chest tightened with the familiar rush of Panatum. Much to do, never enough time. The building around me hummed faintly with the buzz of fluorescent lights. Somewhere, faint voices echoed coworkers, probably stepping away to watch the event. I didn't join them. Why would I? The world could turn upside down, and I'd still be chained to this desk. Minutes dragged, the dimness deepened, and the screen grew harsher against my eyes. My bike-itched stomach growled. I ignored it all. At some point I couldn't say exactly. When the city seemed to fall unnaturally quiet, the usual traffic rumble dulled. The chatter outside vanished. Even the air felt heavier. I rubbed my temples and told myself it was all in my head. Just stress. Just exhaustion. Nothing more, but for the briefest instant, I thought I saw something move in the reflection of my monitor. Who's to blame me? A flicker. A shadow. I spun in my chair. The office was empty. Rows of desks, chairs tucked neatly in place. The faint whine of an old air conditioner. Nothing else. I laughed at myself, bitter, hollow. Get it together. And yet, when I turned back to the screen, the clock in the corner read 12:07. I could have sworn it had just been 11:15. Had I lost almost an hour? I stared at the blinking numbers. My throat dried, the silence of the office pressing in around me. For the first time that day, the reports didn't matter. Something was wrong. I don't know what possessed me to stand up from my desk. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the missing hour. Or maybe it was the way the air had thickened, as though the entire building had sunk underwater. I saved the document out of reflex, even though my hands were trembling, and shut the laptop. The dull snap echoed across the office like a gunshot, too loud, too sharp. My throat was dry. I needed air. The hallway stretched ahead, lined with doors leading to rooms that should have been occupied. Not a sound leaked through them. I tapped one of the handles just to reassure myself. Locked. Another one. Locked. As well, it was as if the whole floor had quietly evacuated, without me noticing. At the end of the corridor, the elevator doors reflected a warped version of me loosened. Hair in disarray, eyes sunken from weeks of bad sleep. For a second I thought I saw my reflection blink a fraction later than I did, but when the elevator chimed, the thought dissolved. The lobby was empty. Too empty. No receptionist, no shuffle of paperwork, no phones ringing, just the faint glow of emergency lights. Though the power was clearly still on. I pushed through the glass doors, half expecting to be blinded by daylight. Instead, I stepped into a muted world. The sky was dark, not night, not storm, but something in between. The Eclipse. I squinted upward. A sliver of light edged the moon's shadow, casting the streets in a dim gray glow. I realized, with a jolt, that I had never seen the city this way. Buildings towered like monoliths. Street lamps flickered, confused by the sudden twilight. For the first time, I noticed other people. Not many, just a handful, but the strange part was their behavior. They weren't watching the sky. Each one moved with deliberate focus, eyes locked on their own errands. A man swept the sidewalk in front of his shop, though dust kept blowing back into place. A woman unloaded groceries from a car, stacking them neatly, one by one, on the curb instead of carrying them inside. A teenager scribbled furiously in a notebook while walking in slow, mechanical circles. Not a single one of them looked up at the Eclipse. Not one of them noticed me. "Hey!" I called out, my voice cracking. "Do you see this?" No answer. The woman with the groceries placed another can on the curb, perfectly aligned with the others. Her expression was blank, her movements steady, ritualistic. A chill crawled up my spine. Primera turned to Hawaii, telling myself it was just nerves, just exhaustion. Maybe this is what happens when you don't leave your desk for days. Hallucinations, stress, nothing more. But the silence gnawed at me. Even the birds were gone. I walked down the street, hands shoved deep in my pockets, trying to shake the weight pressing on my chest. The usual city sounds horns, engines, chatter were absent. Only the scrape of my shoes on the pavement and the low hum of street lamps remained. Another man appeared ahead, sitting on a bench. His head hung low, eyes glued to a small radio resting on his lap. Static poured out of it, loud in the stillness. As I approached, I slowed. Maybe he'd be the first to actually acknowledge me. "You hear that? Primera, ask it." My voice sounded strange, too loud in the quiet street. The sky, the light. It's not normal. The man didn't move. His fingers tapped the side of the radio in a rhythm. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps again. His lips moved, whispering something I couldn't hear. I leaned closer. "Are you?" His head jerked up suddenly. His eyes, they were glassy, unfocused, like he wasn't really looking at me, but through me, past me, into some place I couldn't see. His mouth stretched, forming words that came out as a low murmur. "Not wrong. Not wrong." I stumbled back, my pulse hammered in my ears. He lowered his head again and went back to tapping the radio. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. The static grew louder. I didn't wait to hear more. I turned the corner and walked faster, chest tight, my breath sharp and uneven. The streets felt endless, unfamiliar, as though I had wandered into a part of the city I should have known but didn't. Above, the Eclipse held its place, the thin ring of sunlight glowing faintly like a dying halo. I told myself I needed to go home, or back to the office, or anywhere that felt solid. But even as I said it, I knew something had shifted. The world had slipped into a shadow, and I was standing in it. And for the first time that day, I wished I'd answered my sister differently. I don't remember how long I walked. It could have been 10 minutes. It could have been an hour. The streets stretched on in endless silence, the same buildings repeating like a looping film reel. Coffee shops with chairs still out front, newsstands displaying papers dated the day before. Parked cars collecting no dust, no leaves, no signs of life. What struck me most was the absence of movement. Not just people traffic, animals, anything. The world had been hollowed out, leaving only fragments of a routine that should have been happening but wasn't. The last person I'd seen, the man with the radio, was blocks behind me. Since then, nothing. I stopped in the middle of the street, staring up. The eclipse was still there. It hadn't moved. The pale ring of sunlight clung stubbornly to the edges of the moon, casting everything in that half-light twilight. I tried to convince myself I just didn't understand astronomy well enough. But somewhere in the back of my head, I knew. Eclipses don't last this long. I reached for my phone. No signal. No bars. The clock blinked, frozen at 2:46 p.m. I shoved it back into my pocket, heartbeat quickening. There was a cafe up ahead, lights still on inside. Relief shot through me. Maybe someone was in there. Maybe I wasn't losing my mind. I pulled open the door. The bell above it chimed, cheerful, out of place. But the cafe was empty. Tables were set, cups stacked, coffee brewing equipment humming quietly behind the counter. Steam drifted lazily from a machine, as if it had been left running mid-shift. A half-eaten sandwich sat on one of the plates, bread dried out, untouched. "Hello," I called. My voice echoed against the tiled walls. No answer. I stepped further inside. The air smelled faintly of roasted beans and something sour, like spoiled milk. I moved behind the counter, more out of desperation than boldness, searching for a sign of anyone, anything. The register was open, receipts scattered. A barista's apron lay folded neatly on the floor. I crouched down, picking it up with trembling fingers. It was warm. I dropped it instantly. A sharp sound broke the silence. The bell over the door. He spun around. No one was there. The door was closed. The bell swayed gently, as though invisible fingers had brushed against it. I backed away, heart racing, until I bumped into the counter. My hands searched blindly for balance and landed on a ceramic mug. It toppled, crashing to the floor. The sound was deafening. I didn't wait. I ran. Out the door, into the still gray streets, lungs burning as if I'd been holding my breath since stepping inside. I didn't stop until I reached the intersection. The city unfolded in all directions, avenues, alleys, towers, familiar and foreign all at once. Empty. I wasn't just imagining things. I wasn't just tired. The city was being erased. A flicker of movement caught my eye. At the far end of the street, a lone figure trudged slowly, back bent, dragging something along the pavement. The scraping echoed down the block. I froze, torn between running toward them or away. But then they stopped. Even from a distance, I knew they had noticed me. Their head lifted, jerky, unnatural. The object they were dragging clattered to the ground. It looked like a suitcase, or maybe something heavier. We locked eyes, or at least, I thought we did. Because their face was wrong. From where I stood, it looked blurred, as though I was seeing them through warped glass. Features shifted, slipping in and out of focus, refusing to settle into anything human. I blinked, and in that instant, they were gone. The sukas, too. The street was bare again. I staggered backward, clutching my chest, gasping. I couldn't pretend anymore. Something was happening to the world. The eclipse wasn't just a natural event. It was pulling everything apart, people. Time, reality itself. And I was trapped inside whatever shadow it had cast. Somewhere behind me, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of tapping. 3 beats. Pause. 3 beats. The same rhythm as the man with the radio. It echoed off the walls, closer this time. I didn't turn around. Just ran. I don't know how long I ran. The streets blurred together, rows of shuttered stores, faceless apartments, empty sidewalks that seemed to stretch forever. Every direction looked the same, as if the city had folded in on itself, trapping me inside a maze of its own making. The tapping followed me, sometimes close, sometimes distant, but never gone. Finally, breathless, I slowed in front of a residential block. The houses here were smaller, older, pressed shoulder to shoulder. Most windows were dark, curtains drawn tight, but one, halfway down the street, glowed faintly. A warm yellow light. For a moment, I just stood there, watching it. That glow looked impossibly inviting, like a lifeline. My chest tightened. I didn't trust it. Nothing here made sense anymore. But I couldn't stay out in the open, waiting for the tapping to catch up. I forced my legs forward. The front door was ajar. I hesitated, then pushed it open with a creak that cut through the silence like a scream. Inside, smelled of dust and old wood. The hallway stretched narrow, lined with family photos. My eyes skimmed them. Queely faces blurred, indistinct, like the figure I'd seen earlier. My stomach churned. The light came from a room at the end of the hall. I approached slowly, my footsteps muffled against the faded carpet. When I reached the doorway, I froze. Someone was sitting at the kitchen table. A man, hunched over, staring into a half-empty glass of water. His hair was longer than I remembered, his shoulders heavier, but I knew him instantly. Mark. My chest constricted. I hadn't seen him in years. Mark. My voice cracked. He looked up, eyes tired, but unmistakably his. For the first time since the eclipse began, something in me loosened. A familiar face, but then his expression changed. Not relief, not joy, resentment. His voice was low, bitter. Of course, it'd be you. The words hit harder than I expected. What? What do you mean? What's going on here? Where is everyone? He laughed, dry and humorless. Still pretending you don't know. Still running from the truth. Some things never change. My throat tightened. I don't. You do. He stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. You left me when I needed someone. When I needed you, you turned your back. Do you even remember that night? Or did you bury it under all your excuses and deadlines? Images flashed in my mind, unbidden. His calls, the arguments, the messages I ignored, because I had too much going on. Because I thought I'd circle back later, when it was convenient. But later never came. My voice wavered. I felt bad. Primera rea, lai, did. I wanted to reach out, but by the time I thought about it, it felt too late. I didn't know what to say. You didn't need to say anything. His eyes burned into mine. You just needed to be there, but you weren't. And I learned what I really meant to you. The air between us grew heavy. I wanted to move closer, to explain, to beg for some scrap of forgiveness, but my legs wouldn't obey. I thought about calling you again, Mark said, softer now, almost to himself. Even after everything. But I knew, deep down, I knew you wouldn't answer. You never did. His words dug into me, sharp and precise, each one carving out a truth I'd refused to acknowledge. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. The light in the kitchen flickered, shadows stretched across his face, twisting his features into something harsher. Panic surged in me. Wait, don't go. But he already have. He looked at me one last time. His expression wasn't anger anymore. It was worse. Disappointment. Mark's voice rang in my head, louder than the silence around me. There would be no later. Somewhere outside, the tapping started again. Louder. Closer. I bolted upright, heart pounding, and stumbled back into the hall. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I ran back into the eclipse. The street outside was darker than before, though I knew the eclipse should have been passing by now. Instead, the sun hung frozen overhead, a black disk rimmed with a pale, burning ring. The sky glowed with that eerie twilight light, the kind that made everything look unreal but not quite dreamlike, too sharp, too present. I walked quickly, head down, but every step felt heavier than the last. My mind kept circling back to Mark. His words, his eyes. The way he dissolved in front of me, as if he was never really there. Maybe he wasn't, but the weight in my chest said otherwise. I told myself I needed to focus on something practical. Keep moving. Find someone. Find anyone who could tell me what the hell was happening. A few blocks later, I spotted people. Relief hit me first, like a shot of oxygen. 3 figures stood outside a corner store. 2 women and an older man. My pace quickened as I approached, raising my voice before I even reached them. Hey, do you know what's going on? Where did everybody go? They didn't look at me. Not right away. The man was fumbling with a padlock on the store's shutter. The women were talking quietly, one with a cigarette dangling between her fingers. Their movements were calm. Too calm. Excuse me. I tried again. Louder this time. Have you seen anyone? The streets are empty. People just vanished. Finally, one of the women turned her head. Her eyes passed over me, not quite meeting mine, like she was glancing at a stranger she had no reason to acknowledge. Then she went back to her conversation. The man swore under his breath at the stubborn lock. I stepped closer, desperate. Listen to me. Something's wrong. Don't you notice people are gone? The other woman gave me the faintest look, then more irritation than recognition. She exhaled smoke slowly, shaking her head as if I was a nuisance. Some beggar asking for change. Not fear. Not confusion. Indifference. A chill worked its way up my spine. It wasn't just that they didn't answer. It was that they didn't care. I backed away slowly, muttering, "Forget it." They didn't even watch me leave. As I turned the corner, anger rose in my chest, almost enough to drown out the fear. How could they just stand there, unmoved, when everything around us had collapsed into silence, when the city had emptied itself of life? But deep down, I knew the anger wasn't really for them. It was for me, for how helpless I felt, for how Mark's face still hovered in my mind, his words gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. I kept walking. Block after block, street after street. The silence pressed closer. Even the few scattered people I passed seemed wrong heads down, focused on meaningless routines. A man sweeping his porch again and again, though the ground was spotless. A woman pacing in front of a bus stop, checking her watch every 30 seconds, though no bus ever came. No one spoke to me. No one looked me in the eye. It was like I didn't exist. The sense of isolation gnawed at me until I thought I'd scream just to hear a human voice. But when I finally did, when I shouted into the empty intersection, "Is anyone out there?" Only my echo answered back, and then the tapping. Faint at first. So faint, I thought I imagined it. A soft rhythm against stone. My heart seized. I spun around. Nothing. Just rows of buildings. Silent windows staring down at me. But the sound was there. Slow. Patient. Following. I forced myself forward. Faster now. My eyes darted to every alley, every doorway, half expecting that silhouette to appear again. The tapping quickened with my steps. I cut across another street, nearly tripping on the curb, breath ragged in my throat. The silence returned for a moment, and I almost convinced myself I'd shaken it. Until I looked ahead, a lone figure was standing at the far end of the block. Still, watching. I froze. It wasn't the same blurred stranger from before, at least. Not exactly. This one looked sharper, closer to human, but the shadows still clung too tightly around it, concealing its face, making its proportions seem doble. Arms too long, head slightly tilted, like a question mark carved into flesh. It didn't move, neither did I. We stood locked in that dead street, the eclipse casting everything in its unnatural twilight. And then, just when my courage broke and I stumbled back a step, the figure vanished. Gone. No sound, no trace. Only the echo of tapping fading into the silence. Primera Ryane. Again, not caring where, not caring if I ever found someone who'd actually answer me, because now, I wasn't sure I wanted to know. The silence had become a weight on my chest, heavier with every block I crossed. Even my footsteps seemed swallowed before they could echo. I don't know how long I walked. Minutes, hours, maybe longer. The sky never changed. The eclipse remained frozen overhead, a black wound rimmed with fire. And then I heard it. Not the tapping, something else. A sound I hadn't expected, couldn't have expected, in this dead city. Crying. Thin, fragile, human. My body froze, head whipping toward the sound. It came from somewhere ahead, down a narrow side street lined with dumpsters and trash bins. Primera hesitate. Every part of me screamed to keep moving, not to step into that shadowed alley. But the crying grew sharper, cutting through the still air. I forced myself forward. The smell hit me first. Sour rot and damp metal. The dumpsters were lined against the brick wall, lids askew, bags spilling into the gutter. The crying was louder now, coming from one bin at the far end. My pulse thundered in my ears. I already knew what I was going to see. Still, when I lifted the lid, my breath caught. Inside, wrapped in a soiled blanket, was a baby. Red-faced, tiny fists flailing, eyes squeezed shut as it screamed at the top of its fragile lungs. For a second, my mind went blank. This didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. I stood there, gripping the edge of the dumpster, staring down at the infant like it was some alien creature. Jesus Christ. Primera whispered. The baby cried louder, as if accusing me for taking so long. I glanced up and down the alley. Empty. No mother rushing back in panic. No neighbor poking their head out a window. Just me and the baby. And the sound. That terrible, helpless sound. I didn't move. I couldn't. A part of me wanted to shut the lid and walk away, to tell myself it wasn't real, that I was hallucinating like I did with Mark. But the crying didn't stop. It's clear that me scraping against some part of me I didn't want to acknowledge. I took a step back, rubbing my hands over my face. What the hell am I supposed to do? I muttered. The baby only screamed louder. I stared at it again, heart pounding. My thoughts twisted in circles. This couldn't be happening. None of this could be happening. Why would a baby be here, abandoned in the middle of all this? Who would leave something so fragile in a place like this? I swallowed hard, feeling my throat tighten. My legs carried me forward before I'd even decided. I reached into the bin and lifted the bundle carefully, awkwardly, like it might break in my hands. The crying pierced my ears. Its body was warm, trembling. I pressed the baby against my chest, rocking slightly, shushing without thinking. It didn't help much, but I kept doing it. My arms felt stiff, clumsy. I wasn't built for this. I wasn't meant for this. And yet here I was, holding a stranger's child in a deserted city under an endless eclipse. Confusion swarmed in me. Why me? Why this? I had no answers. Only the weight of the baby, heavier than it should have been for something so small. I looked around again. The alley stretched empty in both directions, not a soul in sight. For the first time since the eclipse began, the fear that had been gnawing at me shifted into something else, something deeper. Responsibility. I didn't ask for it. I didn't want it, but it pressed against me all the same, as undeniable as the child's wails in my ear. I stood there for a long time, rocking, whispering nonsense, waiting for something. Anything to change. Eventually, the crying softened into small hiccups, then quiet whimpers. The baby's tiny hand curled against my shirt, clutching fabric like it had always belonged there. I let out a shaky breath, and then I heard it again. The tapping. Closer this time. My stomach dropped. I turned toward the mouth of the alley, heart in my throat. Nothing there, just the street. Empty under the pale glow of the eclipse, but the sound was real. Patient, steady, following. I held the baby tighter, pressing it against me. Eyes locked on the street as the sound faded once more into silence. For the first time since this began, I wasn't just running for myself anymore. I was running for both of us. The baby was quieter now, but its weight never left my arms. Every step I took down the cracked pavement felt unsteady, as though the ground itself might give way. I kept glancing over my shoulder, waiting for the tapping to return. It didn't. Not yet. The streets ahead opened wider, lined with rows of silent shops. Signs swayed faintly in a breeze I couldn't feel. The eclipse above held steady, black sun burning like a hole in the sky. That's when I saw her. She was standing outside a laundromat, hands at her sides, head tilted just slightly down, like she was listening to something far away. Her clothes were wrinkled, shoes scuffed, and on her pale blouse there were stains. Faint at first, then unmistakable, dark, dried patches. Blood. Her hands, too, smudged red, as though she tried to wipe them clean but couldn't. I stopped cold. My mouth went dry. It was her. Rachel. My chest squeezed tight. For a moment, I almost convinced myself it wasn't real, that my eyes were playing tricks, pulling familiar faces out of the emptiness. But when she looked up and met my gaze, the years collapsed between us in an instant. The baby stirred in my arms, letting out a small cry. Her eyes flicked to it. 10, bike. 2, me. Expression unreadable. I swallowed hard. My voice cracked when I spoke. Rachel. She didn't answer right away. She studied me like I was some stranger she couldn't decide whether to approach or avoid. Finally, she said, softly, "You're still here." The words carried something heavy, not surprise, not relief, something closer to disdain. My throat tightened. I don't understand what's happening. Everyone's gone. I keep seeing people I used to know, people I thought were gone. Her mouth curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. You thought a lot of things. The sting hit me sharper than I expected. I adjusted the baby in my arms, trying to steady myself. She nodded toward the bundle. "You're carrying that like it matters to you." "It does," I said quickly, without thinking. Her eyes narrowed. She looked at me like she wanted to peel back my skin and see if I meant it. "You never carried much for long." The silence between us grew heavy. I wanted to fill it, but the right words wouldn't come. Finally, I forced something out. "Rachel, no primera de ti. Treat you right. Back. 10. I thought about calling you. More times than I can count, but I didn't. And I regret that." Her face didn't soften. If anything, her eyes hardened, glittering with something sharp and cold. "I never had a chance," she said flatly. "Not with you. You never let me." Her voice cracked slightly at the end, but she didn't cry. She stood firm, shoulders squared, as if she'd learned long ago not to waste tears on me. "I was selfish," I admitted. The words tumbled out, raw and clumsy. I thought I was right. I thought I knew better. But I didn't. I ruined things. I know that. She stared at me a long time. Then, quietly, "And you think that means something now?" The baby whimpered. I rocked it gently, eyes still on her. "It means I'm sorry." Her lips pressed into a thin line. She looked down at her hands, turning them as if she'd just noticed the stains again. The blood was dry, flaking, but it clung stubbornly to her skin. "I never forgot," she said. Her tone was detached, but I caught the tremor beneath. I tried to move on, to harden myself. Primera to, because I couldn't carry that weight for both of us. The air between us felt colder than the eclipse's shadow. I wanted to step closer, to tell her I would take that weight, now that I wanted to. Even if it was too late, but I couldn't make myself move. "I don't forgive you," she said simply. The words hit like a blow, but I didn't flinch. I nodded, eyes stinging, because I already knew. She turned away, staring down the street as if she saw something I couldn't. For a moment, I thought she might say more, but she didn't. She just started walking, slow and steady, her figure shrinking into the silence until the eclipse's light swallowed her. I stood there, holding the baby, throat tight and chest hollow. I wanted to call after her. I wanted to beg for one last chance, one word, one touch. But all I did was stand, motionless, as the faint tapping began again in the distance. The sound returned as soon as Rachel's silhouette dissolved into the eclipse's half-light. The tapping, steady, deliberate, no longer far in the distance but closer. I turned, clutching the baby against my chest. But the street behind me was empty. Storefronts stood hollow, glass smeared with dust, doors hanging ajar. Yet the sound persisted, echoing against the walls. Louder now. Tap, tap, tap. My pulse climbed into my throat. The baby stirred, let out a faint cry, and I whispered nonsense to calm it, though my voice shook as much as my hands. 10. Premier. Sa doble Italiano. At the far end of the street, between the shadows of two leaning buildings, something shifted. At first, I thought it was a trick of the eclipse's light, but no, there was form, movement. Tall. Too tall. It stepped forward, slowly, like it had all the time in the world. Its outline quivered, as if the air itself bent around it. I wanted to tell myself it was human, that it was only another shadow, but the longer I stared, the less human it became. Wings. Not like a bird's, not even like the paintings of angels that hung in churches when I was a child. These wings stretched wide, jagged, their feathers more like fractured blades of light and bone. They flickered, bending in and out of existence, as if they belonged to another realm entirely. Its face was worse. No features, only brilliance, as though something burned beneath a mask of skin that never settled. Eyes were there. I knew they were, but I couldn't look directly at them. Each time I tried, pain shot into my skull, as though my mind itself was being scalded. It opened its mouth. The sound wasn't speech, it was a chord, a deep, vibrating hymn that rattled through my ribs. Every instinct in me screamed, run. I did. My legs carried me down the street, faster than I thought possible with the baby in my arms. My breath tore out ragged, echoing off the walls. The hymn behind me grew louder, layered with the relentless tap, tap, tap of its steps. I didn't dare look back. The city blurred. Shuttered shops, cracked asphalt, a hollow bus shelter, all passed in frantic motion. My arms ached with the weight I carried, yet I clung tighter, as though letting go meant instant death. Behind me, the sound shifted. No longer just footsteps, wings unfurled with a noise like tearing metal. The air itself seemed to distort, rushing forward in bursts that nearly knocked me off balance. It was gaining. Primera veered left, down an alley, littered with broken glass. The baby wailed now, shrill, piercing, as if it sensed what followed us. The hymn rose in pitch, bending into something unbearable, a harmony both divine and destructive. Shadows lengthened along the walls. They didn't match my movement, they stretched toward me instead, fingers of darkness clawing across the bricks. I stumbled, nearly falling, but forced myself upright. Pain lanced through my knees. I pushed on, lungs burning, sweat cold across my back. A sudden gust slammed down the alley, a wall of air that carried dust and ash with it. I shielded the baby as best I could, coughing, eyes stinging. Through the haze, I caught glimpses of the being again. It didn't chase like a predator. It advanced like judgment itself and hurried, certain its presence alone enough to crush me. I reached the end of the alley and burst into another street, wider, emptier. The silence here was worse than the hymn. Not a sound, not a bird, not even the wind, except for Italiana. I looked back, just once. It filled the alley's mouth entirely now. Its wings scraped the walls, sending cracks racing up the brick. Light bled from the fractures, a searing glow that felt both holy and merciless. My knees buckled. For a heartbeat, I almost collapsed right there. but something in me, fear, desperation, or sheer animal instinct, forced me to move again. I sprinted down the empty street, every step echoing louder than the last. My vision blurred with tears I didn't remember shedding. The baby's cries rang in my ears, sharp, unbearable, and then silence. The hymn stopped, the tapping ceased. I slowed, heart slamming against my ribs, straining to listen. Nothing. The street behind me was empty again. No wings, no light, no sound, only the eclipse, fixed in its eternal twilight, staring down like an unblinking eye. I stood trembling, chest heaving, sweat dripping down my back. My arms clutched the baby so tightly I was afraid I might crush it. But there was no one there. Not anymore. And that was somehow worse. I kept walking long after the street had gone silent, forcing one foot in front of the other, the baby's weight an anchor in my arms. Every shadow now felt alive, ready to stretch into wings or reach out with judgment. My throat was dry, my chest still rattling from the sprint, but I didn't dare stop. I told myself I had outrun it. Whatever that thing was, whatever it wanted to die, had shaken it off. Allié. I knew it the second I thought it. That presence hadn't needed to chase me. It had let me go. But why? The thought clung to me as I moved through the hollow streets. Storefronts leaned inward, glass reflecting the dull half-light of the eclipse. I kept catching glimpses of myself as I passed, hunched, sweating, clutching something small and helpless. Each glimpse felt foreign, as though I were looking at someone else entirely. Tin, Primera, Sadoblu Italiano. An antique shop, its door hung crooked on a single hinge. The inside dim, cluttered with overturned shelves and toppled mannequins. Against the far wall, half buried in dust, stood a mirror taller than I was. Its frame was blackened with rot, yet the glass was intact, gleaming in a way that didn't belong to this twilight. I stopped in the doorway. Something in me knew better knew not to go in, but my legs carried me anyway. The floor creaked under my shoes. I approached slowly, my breath catching in my chest. The baby whimpered, restless, and I muttered another empty reassurance, my eyes fixed on the glass. When I stood before it, I froze. The reflection wasn't right. The store behind me looked correct. The broken shelves, the crooked door, but the figure in the glass didn't move as I did. I shifted my weight. The reflection stayed rigid. I tightened my hold on the child. The man in the mirror let his arms fall loose. My breath hitched. It was me, and yet it wasn't. His eyes were sharper, colder, narrowed with disdain I had seen in my own expression too many times before. His jaw clenched, lips twisted with disgust, the kind of face I wore when I told people to leave me alone, when I told them their problems didn't matter, when I told myself my work was the only thing that did. I raised my hand. The reflection didn't. It only stared back, contempt etched into every line of its face. Tinit mobit, not to mimic me, not to edge. It leaned forward, closing the distance between us, pressing against the inside of the glass as though it could step through. Its mouth opened. I heard nothing, yet I understood what it was saying. Selfish, cold, empty. I staggered back, nearly dropping the child. My chest constricted, air struggling to enter my lungs. No, I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I was denying it or pleading against it. The reflection slammed its fist against the inside of the mirror. The glass rippled, though it didn't break. I heard the echo in my skull, not in the room. You let them leave. You pushed them away. You never cared. I did, I snapped. My voice cracked. The reflection tilted its head, smirked with the kind of contempt I had once used to cut others down. My knees gave out. I sank to the floor, clutching the baby, shaking. The reflection pressed both palms flat against the glass now, its mouth moving faster, though the words never reached my ears. Still, I understood them all the same. Every insult, every dismissal, every door I had slammed shut. The weight of it crushed me more than the being with wings ever could. Something inside me snapped. With a cry that was more animal than human, I lurched forward and smashed my shoulder into the glass. Pain jolted down my arm. The mirror shuddered but held. Again I threw myself against it. Then again, the baby pressed desperately against my chest as though I could shield it from myself. On the fourth strike, the mirror cracked. A web of fractures split the surface, scattering my reflection into a dozen jagged pieces. The other me broke apart, his expression frozen in shards of fury and disdain. I stumbled back, panting, my shoulder throbbing, my hands shaking. The baby had gone quiet. I looked down at it, wide eyes, unblinking, staring up at me. For a moment, I feared it had seen the reflection too that it knew, but it only blinked, as if nothing had happened. I forced myself up and staggered out of the shop. The cracked mirror loomed behind me, splintered pieces of my own face watching as I crossed the doorway. Back on the street, I sucked in the heavy Eclipse air, steadying my steps, but I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, deep inside, the reflection still lived, still watching, still waiting. And the street stretched on, silent except for the hollow echo of my own footsteps. The baby stirred weakly in my arms, letting out a soft whimper that pulled me back from the dark spiral of my thoughts. I hushed it without meaning the words. My voice cracked, thin, like dry leaves scraping against each other. The air had shifted. I could feel it. It wasn't the heavy dread of wings overhead, nor the oppressive judgment of the mirror. This was different. Warmer, in a way, though no less unsettling. A pull, gentle but unyielding, leading me down a side street I would have otherwise ignored. I turned the corner and froze. He was standing there. My father. My father. The lines of his face were exactly as I remembered, though the years had softened something in his eyes. He wore the old coat he never replaced, the one that smelled faintly of tobacco and machine oil. His hands were clasped, loosely behind his back, his posture firm, patient, as though he had been waiting for me all this time. The breath caught in my throat, my knees nearly gave out. "Dad," the word cracked, barely a whisper, and yet it seemed to echo between the buildings. He looked up at me, a faint smile tugging at his lips, not mocking, not distant, just knowing. I thought. My chest tightened. The words, tangled, came out in fragments. I thought you were gone." He tilted his head slightly, as if considering whether to answer. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady and calm. "Gone. I suppose I am. But you're here, and so am I." I clutched the child closer, not because I feared him, but because my hands needed something to hold on to. My throat burned. "I wasn't there," I blurted. "At the funeral, I didn't even God. I didn't even try. I was working, Dad. I told myself it was important, that primera cool than a tea, just drop everything." But the words spilled out, frantic, desperate. My voice rose and fell, breaking apart like waves on jagged rocks. I should have been there. Primera Sohuldabe sat with you when you were sick. I should have listened when you told me to slow down. Primera Sohuldabe. I should have said goodbye. Tears blurred my vision. I couldn't stop them this time. My chest heaved with the weight of years compressed into seconds. He stepped closer. His eyes, so calm, so steady, met mine. For a moment, I thought he might reach out. Might put a hand on my shoulder the way he used to when I was younger. But he didn't. He only shook his head gently. "What's done is done," he said. "We don't get to redo the moments we waste. You carry them, and they carry you." I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. My heart screamed for some sign of forgiveness, some release. But the truth was there in his tone. What was done was done. I was wrong, I whispered. My voice crumbled. "I know it doesn't matter now. But I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." His expression softened. Not quite forgiveness. Not quite reproach. Something in between. A recognition. "I know," he said simply. Silence hung between us, heavy and fragile. The eclipse dimmed light further, turning his figure into an outline against the darkened street. I wanted to move closer, to hold him, to beg for another chance, but my legs refused to obey, and deep down I knew why. This wasn't a reunion. It was a reckoning. At last, he sighed, a sound like leaves in the wind. "I have to go." "No," I blurted, stepping forward. "Not yet. Please. Just stay a little longer." His faint smile returned, but this time it was tinged with sorrow. He turned, his coat brushing lightly as he began to walk toward the corner. I stumbled after him. "Dad, wait. Please, I can do better. I swear. I rushed after him, nearly tripping, the baby squirming against me as I clutched it tighter. But when I turned the corner, the street was empty. No footprints, no fading figure. Nothing but silence. I stood there, trembling, the weight of loss pressing against my ribs until I thought they would crack. The baby whimpered again, and I realized my tears had fallen onto its small cheek. I wiped them away clumsily, muttering apologies to someone who couldn't possibly understand. Then I straightened, though every part of me wanted to collapse, because the eclipse was still overhead, the streets were still barren, and whatever had just happened, it wasn't the end. It was only a reminder, and a punishment. The world felt thinner now, after my father's disappearance, after the hollow silence that swallowed his final words. Every step I took seemed to echo in a place I couldn't see, but the baby was still here. Still real. Its small body shifted against my chest. Fragile warmth pressed into me. The faint rhythm of its breathing steadied mine. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been clutching it until I forced my grip to loosen, worried I might hurt it in my desperation to hold on. I lowered my gaze. Two eyes, wide and unblinking, stared back at me. Not accusing, not judging, just present. "Don't look at me like that," I muttered, though my voice cracked halfway through. "I don't even know what I'm doing." The baby whimpered softly, as if answering. I adjusted my arms, cradling it more carefully now, supporting the fragile head like I'd once seen someone do on a bus years ago. The memory was hazy, but my body remembered what my mind didn't. A strange calm came over me, fragile as glass. For the first time since the eclipse began, I didn't feel completely consumed by regret or fear. Holding the child, there was purpose. A small one, maybe, but real. I couldn't undo the funeral I missed. I couldn't call back the friends I'd pushed away. I couldn't take back the words I spat at the woman I'd once loved. But I could do this. I could protect this child. A distant rumble pulled me from the thought. Not thunder. Something heavier. The sound of stone grinding against stone. Low and resonant, like the very earth shifting under its own weight. I froze. My eyes darted down the street. At first, nothing. Just the endless rows of darkened windows, the skeletal outlines of buildings against the twilight. But then the air changed dense, pressing down. The faint warmth I had clung to began to fade. I tightened my hold on the baby. "Don't worry," I whispered. "I won't let it touch you. Whatever it is, I won't." I moved quickly, forcing myself into a jog despite the ache in my legs. Every corner I turned, I expected to see wings unfurling, or that impossible gaze burning holes into my back. But the streets remained empty, the silence broken only by the shallow breaths of the child against me. We passed an abandoned cafe, chairs still scattered as though people had fled mid-conversation. A playground, the swings rattling faintly, though there was no wind. A crosswalk where the light still blinked red, though no cars would ever come. Through it all, I whispered, not prayers. I didn't know how to pray anymore. Just fragments, promises I wasn't sure I could keep. I've been a coward most of my life. I pushed people away, thought I didn't need unknown. But you don't deserve that. You don't deserve any of it. The baby cooed softly. I sound so small it nearly broke me in half. We reached a narrow alley. I ducked into it, pressing my back against the wall, clutching the baby close. My breath was shallow, my ears straining for movement. For a long time, nothing. Then footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Not the frantic shuffle of someone lost, something purposeful. I felt the weight of unseen eyes on me. My pulse thundered in my ears. I looked down at the child, its face serene, even as mine twisted with fear. "Stay quiet," I whispered, though I knew it couldn't understand. My voice cracked, rough from exhaustion. "Just stay quiet. I'll take care of it." The footsteps grew louder. Then they stopped. The silence was crushing. I forced myself to peek around the edge of the wall. The street beyond was empty, painted in the dim light of the eclipse, but the air shimmered faintly, like heat rising from asphalt. Shapes moved in that distortion. Not solid, not fully there, but real enough to remind me of wings, vast and unbearable. Primera jerked back, my heart in my throat. The presence lingered, watching, waiting. And then, slowly, the pressure lifted. I didn't breathe until the street was still again, the shimmer gone. I slid down the wall, my legs trembling, the baby cushioned against me. I held it tighter than before, though now it wasn't from fear. It was from something deeper, a need I couldn't explain. I pressed my lips to its tiny forehead, the gesture clumsy, almost awkward. "I'm not leaving you," I whispered. "Not like I left everyone else. Not this time." The baby stirred, then settled. Its breath warmed my chest. And in that fragile silence, for the first time, I felt something close to resolve. The world could crumble, the shadows could close in, the eclipse could devour everything, but I wouldn't let go. Not of this. Not of the one thing left that gave me a reason to keep moving forward. The streets were no longer silent. I could hear Ito's measured, deliberate steps, never hurried, never uncertain. Each echo seemed to pin me in place, as though the city itself were conspiring to funnel me into a corner. I clutched the child against my chest, whispering without thinking, "Hold on, I won't let it take you." But my own words sounded fragile, already fraying at the edges. The light of the eclipse painted everything in a dim, metallic glow. Shadows stretched unnaturally across walls and pavement, bending toward the presence that followed me. And then I saw it again. The figure blocked the far end of the street. Its form was blinding yet dreadful, a suggestion of wings that were not wings, of limbs that bent in ways they shouldn't. The mere outline was enough to suffocate the air from my lungs. I turned, ran blindly, my heart beat louder than my own breath. Every corner I turned, every alley I darted into, it was there, not chasing in the way a beast might, but appearing, inevitable, at the edge of my vision. The hunter did not rush, it didn't need to. I stumbled over broken pavement, crashing into the ground. Pain tore across my leg as glass from a shattered window bit deep into my flesh. Warmth began to seep, sticky, down my calf. The baby cried harder, the sound shrill and desperate, and for the first time I thought, I won't make it. Still, I forced myself up, staggering forward. Each step sent a fresh wave of pain, leaving droplets of blood in my trail marks no predator could ignore. My vision pulsed at the edges, the world tightening with each beat of my heart. At last, I threw myself into a narrow passage between two crumbling walls, collapsing against the stone. My breath came ragged. The baby pressed so tightly against me I feared I might smother it, but I couldn't let go. The pressure of its presence was still there, humming through the air, seeping into the stones around me. I knew it could find me if it wished. I knew hiding was nothing but a borrowed moment. I pressed a hand against my leg, the blood slick and hot, and whispered this time not to the child, but to myself just a little longer. Just a little longer. Somewhere beyond the alley. The hunter waited. For a while, I believed I was safe. The alley was deserted, only faintly lit by the waning crescent of the eclipse. The world looked like it had been drained of color. Everything pressed flat beneath a dim and lifeless sky. My wound throbbed with each step, blood sticking my clothes to my skin. But the baby's warmth against my chest anchored me. Its breathing was shallow, restless, but alive. That was all that mattered. The silence stretched on, my ears, still ringing from the chase, strained to catch any trace of pursuit. But there was nothing, no wings tearing through the air, no ground trembling under steps too vast for this world. I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes for just a moment, letting myself imagine that maybe I had outrun it. Maybe it had given up. Maybe I could still make it back, deliver the child to safety. Pretend this eclipse was just a strange day, and a string of strange days. The thought barely formed when the air itself shifted. It was not a sound at first, but a knowing, a vibration inside my skull that seemed to split me open from within. My breath faltered, heart hammering against my ribs as the words carved themselves into me. You think you can hide? My eyes flew open. The alley was empty but heavier. The air pressed against me, thicker with every breath, and I staggered back a step, clutching the baby tighter as if I could shield it from something I couldn't even see. And then it was there. Not approaching, not arriving. It simply was. One moment, the alley was void. The next, its mouth was filled by a figure that bent the world around it. It didn't move like flesh. It existed like a truth that could no longer be denied. Wings, if that word could still describe them, spread beyond the buildings. Feathers like blades of molten light, one instant. A tapestry of unending eyes the next. Its face was not one face, but many, shifting, cycling. A kaleidoscope of expressions, both human and inhuman. I tried to look away but couldn't. My mind recoiled, and yet some deeper part of me recognized what I was seeing. Not a monster, not a demon. Something older, something far more terrible in its purity. The baby began to cry, a raw, piercing sound that echoed in the narrow space. I hushed it, though my own voice cracked under the strain. My leg trembled, nearly giving out, but I forced myself upright, back pressed to the cold wall. It did not advance. It didn't need to. The weight of its gaze pinned me where I stood, as though every step I had taken until now had been guided here. Inevitable. You run from what you are. The words boomed in me, not from its mouths, but from every fiber of my being. My throat clenched. What do you want from me? My voice was hoarse, broken, the plea of a man cornered but unwilling to collapse. Its form shuddered, angles shifting, wings folding in strange patterns. I was always here. I shook my head, desperate. No, you were chasing me. My words faltered as the truth began to sink in. Had it really been chasing me? Or had it only been showing me the way, hurting me through each confrontation, each scar of the past I had tried so hard to bury? I looked down at the baby, its tiny body trembling in my arms. For a moment, the cries dulled, its eyes wide as though seeing something I couldn't. I swallowed hard, shielding it closer. Why me? I asked, my voice little more than a whisper. Why now? The answer didn't come in words. It came in memory, in the silence I had left behind, in the friendships I had broken, in the faces of the people I'd lost, whose hands I'd refused to hold when they needed me most. My father's voice, my ex's eyes, the friends I had cast aside, they all rose at once, pressing down on me like a tide I could no longer resist. Tears welled, hot and unwanted. I shook my head, trying to fight them back. I know, I rasped. I know what I've done. I know who I've hurt. For the first time, the being moved, or rather, shifted. Its wings arched upward, a slow, deliberate motion that seemed to bend the shadows around us. Its many eyes locked on me, piercing through whatever fragile walls I still clung to. Then face it. The words reverberated until I thought my chest might crack. I slid down the wall, unable to hold myself upright any longer. The baby whimpered, and instinctively, I rocked it, murmuring apologies it could never understand. Apologies meant for everyone else, for all the faces I had seen since the eclipse began. I thought, for a moment, that the entity would strike then, that its purpose was to end me, to drag me into whatever judgment awaited, but it didn't. It simply watched, vast and unblinking, as if waiting for something inside me to finally break. I'm sorry, I whispered. My voice fractured under the weight of the truth. I'm sorry for all of it. The being did not answer. Instead, it simply remained, a towering sentinel of light and shadow, silent but unrelenting. I realized then that this was not the end yet. This was the final threshold. Whether they first crossed it or not was mine to decide. And with that recognition came a chill deeper than any wound, a dread colder than death itself. The true trial had only begun. I dragged myself up the stairwell, every step a battle against the fire in my leg. The baby's soft weight in my arms kept me moving. Its cries had quieted into a fragile rhythm, like a heartbeat against my chest. I told myself I was close. I told myself there would be answers inside. The office door groaned open, and there it was. The desk, the computer humming under the glow of the monitor, and me, slumped over, motionless, skin pale in the sickly light, one hand stiff around the mouse, eyes closed in the same exhaustion I carried every day. I froze. The baby whimpered, my knees buckled. No. The word tore out of me. No, I'm here. I'm right here. But I wasn't. Not anymore. Something inside cracked open like a dam breaking, and suddenly memories flooded through me, sharper now, stripped of all excuses. I saw myself hunched over this very desk, night after night, ignoring calls, shutting out voices. My father's futurist. Because of a meeting, friends left behind without a word, and her face turned away as she sat on the edge of the bed, silent tears staining the sheets. The argument, the shouting, my words like knives. We can't do this. Not now. It'll ruin everything. Her hands pressed to her stomach, trembling. My refusal to listen, my silence after. The baby stirred in my arms, but when I looked down, nothing. The blanket hung limp against my chest. Empty, no. Please. My voice broke. I clawed at the air as if I could pull it back into existence, but there was nothing. The child had vanished, like a shadow burned away by the truth. I collapsed to the floor, sobbing, the weight of absence heavier than anything I'd ever carried. The light shifted. The presence filled the room vast, impossible, wings stretching beyond sight, not as a hunter now, but as something infinite, patient. You see. The voice reverberated in my bones. I pressed my forehead to the ground. I'm sorry, I whispered, words ragged, torn from the deepest part of me. For her, for Ime, for all of it. My chest heaved. I should have stayed. I should have been better. I should have. The brilliance brightened, folding around me. Not cruel, not tender. Absolute. You may remain, or you may go. The choice fell into me like a stone into water, rippling outward. Stay, bound to the shadows, the regrets, or step into the light, carrying nothing but what little repentance I had left. The desk flickered. The corpse slumped over it, fading into haze. The eclipse tremored above, its edges bleeding light. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, I was alone. The office, gone. The body, gone. And the baby gone. Only the light remained silent, waiting, and me, trembling at the threshold.